Is jy reg vir 'n paar kraamstories?
Ja, ek het amper gedink jy gaan my vra, maar toe wou ek sê hou verby, dankie.
Hou verby,
Ons,
hou verby.
Fokus op die kykers se terugvoer.
So hierso sê Susie Binneman. Sy sê gesteriliseer na my jongste wat gebore is op 8 Februarie. 33 jaar terug en ja, nou is my sterilisasiebaba al 29 jaar oud en ook gebore op 24 Desember. So dis 'n verrassing nie. As jy nou dink jy gaan nou nie weer
Ja.
'n babatjie kry en jy het nou besluit. En so aan. Goeiedag. Ek is nou 59 jaar oud. Ons het op 'n plaas by Brits gebly. Ek was die jongste kind van 8. Ek is sommer by die huis gebore, 4.5 kg. Met die hulp van 'n vroedvrou wat uitgekom het plaas toe in die nag. Merkwaardige werk wat hulle verrig het. Groete Piet, Swanepoel Vereniging. Kan jy glo? Hier was nog 'n lucky een. Hierso is iemand wat in diep moeilikheid was, dink ek, op daai dae. My dogter, Elsa, nou nie my nie. My dogter se geboorte het ek die vorige aand action cricket gaan speel. Dit was 'n 8 uur wedstryd. Maar die game het bietjie uitgereën in aanhalingstekens. Toe kom ek eers 1:30 by die huis. 1:30 die oggend. 3 uur die oggend, 'n uur en 'n half later, toe kry hy 'n elmboog in die rug van sy vrou af. Jaag hospitaal toe en my kind is 3:30 gebore.
So.
Ja. Sy eerste woorde aan die babatjie was Scully. Was was baie lief vir jou. Want ek bedoel hy kyk weet jy of jy 'n uur en 'n half jouself nugter gelê het.
Nee.
Ja. Hy het ompad hospitaal toe gery. Callie, ek bly julle is almal veilig na al die jare. Dis 'n goeie storie.
Ja, so en dit is dan nou half ook inleidend, soos wat ons nou uitkom uit vanoggend se gesprek en dit met die lektor Winnie Motlolometsi wat vanoggend saamkuier om oor die groeiende tendens om met die hulp van vroedvroue te kraam. So good morning Winnie and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning and thank you very much for having me.
And it's a good morning from myself and Jorna as well. He'll be asking you a question a little bit later. But I would like to start with the status of midwives in South Africa. Maybe some stats that you can share with us, if you don't mind.
Yes, I would share it with you. And unfortunately, it's one of the most difficult questions to answer when you're in South Africa. And I'll tell you the reasons why it's the most difficult. The first one is that our professional regulatory body does not have a separate register of practicing midwives. So the midwives in South Africa have a dual registration. It means when we qualify both as nurses and midwives. So if you look at the register of those that are qualified in South Africa as nurse midwives, we are clubbed together. So currently, the total number of nurse midwives in South Africa are something like 156,000+. So that's why I'm saying it's just difficult, because if we had to isolate the midwives, and in this sense we always say practicing midwives, then we would give you an accurate number of exactly how many practicing midwives do we have in South Africa.
I've got a question. Do you have to be a nurse, qualified nurse, to be a midwife, or is it different training?
No, unfortunately, you have to be qualified. In South Africa, we qualify as nurse midwives. We've got 2 different programs that are taking place in South Africa. The first one is that you would go to a college or a university and register for a diploma course. Of course, at the university, you register for a degree course. The comprehensive course takes 4 years. But at the end of the training, be it a diploma at the college or at the university, a degree, you register as a nurse, but who has also the additional qualifications of being a general nurse, a psychiatric nurse, a community nurse, and a midwife. So that's why when you look at the epaulets of the current crop of midwives that have been from training, you would see that they wear maroon epaulets, and then they've got 3 bars. One is orange, or if you like, yes, orange, you can say it's for community nursing. The other one is navy blue, dark blue, it's for psychiatric nursing. The epaulette that is maroon is for general, and the one that I would like to talk about most today is the green bar, which is that of a midwife. So ultimately, you do register as a nurse and a midwife with additional qualifications.
Well, that's very interesting. How would you define or describe the role and also the importance of midwives in the public sector?
The midwives really play a very important role, simply because midwives care for the women during pregnancy, during birth, and the postnatal period. In actual fact, we don't even start with women when they are pregnant. We start with them from the continuum of when they are girl children. They're providing contraceptive services and good nutrition so that by the time they become pregnant, you already have got somebody who's well prepared to cater for the baby. So that's the continuum of midwifery care that midwives do. Now, to show the importance of midwives in the public sector, there was a time where Africa had an initiative, they called it Campaign on Accelerated Reduction of Maternal and Child Mortality in Africa. But specifically in South Africa, recognizing the role of midwives and the importance that the midwives bring in making sure that the women are safe, there was this slogan or a motto that was adopted by South Africa as a nation to say, no woman should die whilst giving life. Because the question was, how can it be that this very woman who's expected to bring life now at this moment, at this point in time, how can it be that when she gives birth, her life is taken away? So unfortunately, as years went by, we did not even meet the Millennium Development Goals that were set at in the year 2000. So now we are at a race of making sure that by the year 2030, let me say rather, that no woman dies whilst giving life. And we also save the babies and we also save the children.
Now, Winnie, we would like to ask you about, whether it's an increasing trend in South Africa, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Ons gaan voort met vanoggend se gesprek met die lektor Winnie Motlolometsi wat saamkuier om oor die groeiende tendens om met die hulp van vroedvroue te kraam gesels. So Winnie, thanks again for joining us, and I would like to get to the next question. Is there any linkage between midwifery, midwives, and gender inequality?
Of course, there is a linkage between midwifery, the midwives, and the gender equality aspects. You know, the issues for women around gender equality and access to education also extends to midwives as a woman-dominated profession. Although in South Africa we do have a progressive constitution, yet when you look at grassroots level, gender equality has not been realized. Women are still viewed as weaker and vulnerable and less suited for the workplace, particularly when they are pregnant and they are about to give birth. There's conformity to sexual gender norms, and that is based on cultural or religious bias. And that on its own creates a lot of conflict for some women. And others are still dealt with in a violent way. The other flip side of the coin is that most midwives in South Africa are female, as this is a woman-led profession. And it exists to facilitate female sexual, reproductive, maternal, and child health. So if you look at it, women as both givers and receivers of care come into focus. And the core characteristics of midwifery are to respect women and their views and work in partnerships with women. Yet, midwifery practice is governed by non-midwives. And because they do not have, that is the midwives, because they do not have their own regulatory authority as women, they are seen to be of lower status, along with the women that they give midwifery care to.
Are there any male midwives or midmen? What do we call them? I'm just curious because I mean I can totally understand it. It's a women-driven industry, so I'm just curious.
Indeed, there are male midwives, and we call them exactly that, midwives.
Okay.
It's sometimes something that people joke around to say, should we not call them mid-husbands? But they are midwives. If you look at our regulatory body, when they categorize them, they call them accoucheurs. And that is a word that is taken from Latin, and it means the assistant to a midwife. That's why from the Society of Midwives perspective, we prefer to call them exactly that, because they are equal to us and we are all rendering the same services. So we call them midwives.
Let's talk about the future. Is using a midwife an increasing trend in South Africa?
Oh, yes, it is. There seems to be a demand, more and more of a demand for midwives. And unfortunately, in the public sector, you will not go to any healthcare facility or any hospital and say, I want to be taken care of by a midwife. And the reason why women are choosing to be cared for by midwives is because they prefer less technological, less obstetric and medicalized birth. What do I mean by this? I mean that contrary to the other skilled healthcare practitioners like your doctors, your obstetricians, and your gynecologists, the midwives themselves subscribe to and we follow the midwifery philosophy and model of care. In short, this model of care that midwives follow is about putting more focus on the family as a whole. Or we say we give women-centered holistic care. One of the aspects that is key to the midwifery model of care is that we view birth as a normal physiological process, and it doesn't require any intervention unless there is a complication. That is why you will see that under the care of the midwives, a woman is allowed to walk about, a woman is allowed to eat and drink while she's still in labor. She can go out and sit outside with families, with friends. And by the time she gives birth, she can even choose the position that she feels that is much more comfortable for her to give birth in. Hence my favorite quotation when I tie this with the midwifery model of care. I always say, just as a woman's heart knows how and when to pump, her heart knows when to beat. Her lungs knows when to inhale and when to exhale. And even her hand knows when to pull back from fire. So does her body know how to give birth. No one should be directing the woman as to how should you be giving birth, because birth is a normal physiological process and every woman's birth is different, one from the other. Even you as one particular woman, you can have 3, 4, whatever, how many kids, but all the women will tell you, each and every one of the birth of my children was different.
Well, Winnie, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
En dit was dan die lektor Winnie Motlolometsi wat vanoggend saamgekuier het om oor hierdie onderwerp te gesels.